Today, we're here to talk about crafting an affordable connectivity program outreach campaign. I'm Jenee Saffold, Benefits Data Trust Policy Attorney. With me today also are my colleagues Ryan Lauko, BDT's Senior Director of Operations, and Jessica Westbrook, BDT's Content Manager. Next slide, please. So today we're going to discuss a little bit about BDT, who we are, what we do, discuss data-driven outreach and why that's an effective outreach strategy for benefits generally, but specifically about why it's effective for the Affordable Connectivity Program. Also, we'll delve into some pretty practical outreach best practices. And lastly, how some of those best practices can be utilized for ACP outreach. Next slide, please. Benefits Data Trust is a national nonprofit that for nearly 20 years has harnessed the power of data, policy, and technology to provide efficient and dignified access to assistance. We strive to help people live healthier, more independent lives by creating smarter and more efficient ways to access essential benefits and services. At the core of what we're trying to do is working to solve the problem that is $80 billion in government assistance goes untapped nationally each year. And this is from an estimate looking at healthcare, tax credits, food, financial aid, and broadband assistance for persons eligible but unenrolled in these programs. And in working towards solving this problem, we've done data-driven outreach in cities and states to secure more than $9 billion in benefits assistance for families and individuals nationwide, with funding from government and some of the nation's leading philanthropies. We've recently launched the first phase of a multi-year effort to promote the Affordable Connectivity Program nationally. And we're hoping to use our nearly 20 years of experience in benefit program outreach with programs like SNAP, WIC, and Medicaid, and apply those best practices that we've gleaned to ACP outreach. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Thank you, Jenee. I'm Ryan Lauko, the Senior Director of Operations here at BDT. We want to start off by talking about just how important data-driven outreach is and how effective it can be. So we've got a couple quotes here, but first off, our first citation comes from our work with JPAL at MIT. And we did a study with them that showed that just sending SNAP outreach letters with instructions on how to apply for SNAP and letting people know they might be eligible to people who are very likely eligible for SNAP nearly doubled participation in SNAP. And that was just from, again, letting people know about how to access the benefit. Another recent example is the Treasury Department sent out letters to people who were eligible for tax credits, but also might not have health insurance. And again, explaining how to enroll. And this dramatically increased health insurance signups and saved lives. Also recently, ACP outreach has been responsible for nearly doubling the enrollments over the course of 5 days just by sending out text messages in Massachusetts. Michigan texted about 1.3 million people and gained about 25,000 new ACP enrollees as a result. So what should we consider when we're doing data-driven outreach if we want to achieve similar results? First off, you need to think about what types of data you have access to. Who is your outreach pool, and what permissions do you already have to reach out to folks? So for instance, you might recognize that people who are already receiving SNAP or other benefits are automatically eligible for ACP. You might recognize that a group of people might have a particular need, or are already not using this benefit, but could gain better access through it. So what can you do with this data to make sure that many people as possible know about it? When you're doing your messaging, it's key to identify what your call to action is. What do you want people to do? Do you want them to go to a website to apply on their own? Do you want them to appear at a tabling event or other resource where they can go in person to learn more and get help applying? It's always key that this call to action is very short and to the point. You're not giving people too many instructions. Your focus on is just enough information for them to take action and then letting them know what that action is. And also key to recognize that what languages are present amongst your population. Do you have a high percentage of people who speak Spanish or another language in a community? Is it possible to send your outreach both in English and a second or third language? And then in general, think about best practices that we'll be talking about a little more on writing messages, how to keep things short and sweet and to the point, how to make sure your audience is recognizing the importance of the benefit and how it can help them, and so forth. Another thing to think about is how will you be getting this outreach out there? Will you be doing it through letters, flyers, texts? All of these kind of have their own advantages one way or the others, but today we'll be talking mostly about letters and texts. Something else to be thinking about when it comes to text messages is, can they be interactive? Does it have to be a one text static message, or can you let people ask a question or pick an option to get more information about the benefits? We found that it's key to, on whenever you send a text, to give the information up front about what the action you want them to take is. But if you give people the opportunity to engage a bit, we see that in general, people are more likely to take action afterwards. How many messages do you plan on sending out? Is one letter, 2 letters, multiple opportunities to put information out there? Do you think you can send out multiple text messages? How specific can you get with timing? Can you line up your messaging to be around a known life event that can make it someone more interested in applying for the benefit? And then do you need prior consent to access, to use your data to conduct this outreach? Sometimes that can be specific to your data source. And finally, it's important before you get started to figure out what you want to learn by doing this outreach. What do you think you can learn by doing this? And what steps can you take to make sure that your evaluation includes as many outcomes as possible that you can then use to better understand what your impact was and how you might want to improve your outreach on a second attempt. These are a few key best practices that we thought, and just to summarize them a bit, I think one of the first and most important is to establish legitimacy. There's a lot of outreach out there coming from texts, emails, letters that could be distracting people from key and important outreach like this. So it's important early on to establish the legitimacy of your outreach, either by using the seal or logo of a state agency that you're affiliated with, a trusted CBO source, or some other actor in the community that you know will resonate with your target population. Always important to, again, make sure you've got a specific call to action and you're being as simple and to the point as possible. Recognizing that people aren't always going to know what the acronyms are, the definitions of benefits that people that are like ACP, and pointing out things like internet service or connection to Wi-Fi, things that people will instantly pick up on. But recognizing also that a lot of information about the benefits themselves is not necessarily going to take someone to make the next step to getting the benefit. So a key thing to think about is the F pattern. And that's, we know people read in this way where they'll accept a certain amount of information kind of in a longer line, a call to action of what you want them to do to take action based on that information. And then finally, short and sweet, how will they go about taking that action? When it comes to size of the content with text, it's important to stay under the minimum character requirements. Otherwise, you will, or rather maximum requirements. Otherwise, you risk sending many text messages, which could be overwhelming and for some people come out of order. And then from there, always important to recognize the benefit value to the client, whether that's a specific dollar value or a convenience factor with ACP. There's definitely a specific financial value that can affect someone's household. And then specifically, again, for texting, giving people an opportunity to stop getting outreach. So I'm going to pass it over to Jessica Westbrook to talk a little bit more about the behavioral science considerations we have whenever we're creating outreach.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm Jess Westbrook. I am the content manager at BDT. So like Ryan mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the behavioral science principles and how you can incorporate this into your messaging. So what is behavioral science? Behavioral science is the study of economic decision-making and human behavior. And utilizing these principles in messaging is likely to increase follow through with your call to action. And there are a few that we use often at BDT. Implementation intention is the first one. This is a commitment device that's used to encourage someone to complete a task. Then we have social norms. This is the idea that much of our behavior is dependent on our perception of what others do and think we should do. And then there's loss aversion. This is the idea that the pain of losing is psychologically about twice as powerful as gains. Therefore, we tend to do more to avoid a loss. And then lastly, we have psychological ownership. This refers to how much an individual feels that something is their own. The more people feel that government benefits are their own, the less likely they are to perceive applying for them as asking for help, and therefore the more likely they are to be interested in applying. And of course, there are many other behavioral science principles that can be integrated into messaging, such as personalization or unit perception. The important takeaway here is that adding these principles into messaging can increase engagement and application rates. And move to the next slide. Okay, here we have some examples of behavioral science in messaging. The first one is implementation intention. The example we have here is, when do you plan to apply? This question prompts clients to create a plan, and then we push this even further and ask clients to pick a specific day in the near future, such as today or tomorrow, and then we urge them to write it down so they don't forget. The example we have for social norms is many people enrolled in SNAP have already applied for ACP and received $30 per month for internet services. This taps into the idea of paying attention to what other people are doing around you and using that as a reason to take action. Moving into our example for loss aversion, we have, you may be losing up to $360 per year by paying for internet without ACP. Or applying can get you $360 per year for internet services. Don't miss out. So we're really hitting home the idea that clients are missing out or losing something by not acting. And then lastly, we have psychological ownership. Our example for this is claim the $30 per month in internet services that belong to you by going to getinternet.gov today. And we're really emphasizing the idea that it's theirs for the taking, and it's something that belongs to them already, which is a really strong motivator for action. So we can move into the next slide, and I'll talk to you about some sample messages we wrote. So depending on your organization's texting capabilities, one of these messages scenarios may make more sense for you to choose than the other. So the first scenario we have is on the column to the left. And this is if you're sending one SMS, which would be a max of 160 characters. And if your messages are one way, which means clients can't reply and expect a response. The second scenario is on the right. And this is if you're sending two SMS, which is typically what we do at BDT, which is 306 characters. And our messages are dynamic, which means we have reply options. So you'll see in both scenarios, we're establishing some legitimacy by establishing the sender at the beginning of the text. We're saying State Department of Human Services, which of course should be filled in with the specific state or organization name. And then you'll notice that in both messages, we identify the specific dollar amount of $30 per month that they could receive. And we have a clear call to action for where they can apply, directing them online to a trusted government website. We also include the client's first name in each message, and that's to make the message seem even more personalized and legitimate. You'll see in the second scenario on the right, if a client responds with learn more, we take the opportunity to provide more context about the benefit, inform the client about how they can qualify, and then highlight the importance of acting quickly. And of course, we're only showing some sample messages here, but BDT, we've had success with multiple text attempts in the past. Usually we see a waterfall effect in terms of effectiveness, where the initial text has the most responses and it gets less effective and less impactful from there. Okay, let's move into our sample letter. So in sending a letter, of course, you have quite a bit more real estate to play with. We've provided a sample letter so you can see more of the behavioral design principles in different contexts and how formatting changes can really make important information stand out. We don't just have paragraphs of text, we have a list, we have bullets, we have an icon, we use bolded text, we have a post-it note. We're doing our best to draw attention to the most important info and not overwhelm the clients with too much information. Okay. So it's important to send the letter from a recognizable organization. I think if you press next, Ryan, it will highlight, yes, there we go. It's important to send the letter from a recognizable organization. It adds legitimacy, and using a logo that they're familiar with is likely to increase open rates. And then you'll see we also have an image of a post-it note at the top right corner. We've used a specific font that looks handwritten because this gives the impression of personalization, and it adds emphasis to important information. So including something like this will really increase interaction with your call to action. And you'll see we also include the client's first name in our outreach, which adds personalization, also furthers legitimacy. And you'll notice we also start the letter off with good news. And this is to use the primacy bias, which is another behavioral science principle, to really help clients remember this letter as presenting good news. We've bolded, you qualify for $30 each month for internet services to really emphasize that the clients are eligible and how much money they could receive. The dollar value really makes it feel more tangible. And you'll see that we've laid out the steps to apply in 2 easy to understand actions. The easier we make it for clients, the more likely they're going to be able to complete the call to action. We've also bolded that it only takes 5 minutes to apply. This is a major motivator, and it lets clients know that it's not something they have to put off when they have more time. This is something they can do right now or even later that day. We've also used psychological ownership with claim your discounted internet services and loss aversion with the phrase, don't miss out on $360 per year. At the bottom of the letter, we recommend having a signer from someone within your organization. Again, this adds legitimacy, it adds a personal touch, and we know this increases likelihood of action. And at the very bottom, we have a postscript. And people are likely to read this first because it stands out just as much as a title or a bold text. So make sure you use this space to communicate really important information. And this wraps it up, so I'll pass it back to Jenee.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. We hope that this information is useful for your ACP outreach endeavors. And if you have any questions for us, you can email us at partnerships@bdtrust.org. Thanks again and have a great day.